Captain, Captain. Okay, Captain, Captain, written by the great Texas bluesman Mance Lipscomb. And this is a monotonic blues in the key of A. I like this. The idea in a lot of Mance's tunes that I've heard is that he keeps his steady, sort of dead thumb bass, very percussive sounding, and he often doesn't change the bass note between chords. An example is this: he goes from A to D, and we'll talk about that D in a minute because that's a little interesting thing he does there too. But all that time he's playing the fifth string. So we're starting off with what I would call a typical long A or G shape, abbreviated G shape. Talking in cage terms, of course. Go back and forth between the root note and the flat third. Now when we go to the D chord, really the D chord that's implied is always a D major or a D7, but he'll do these little flicks of a D minor. For instance, one with that, we do a quick shift to the 4-chord D in this song. So the first bar is, then we go to D. He does that little hammer-on pull-off. Back to A. And that lick right there is very cool. Kind of throws in that there's a D sharp, E flat note there in between. Excuse me. So that's kind of a critical lick in this song. We go back to D. This time I'll start off in a regular D major second position chord, but then quickly switch to that D minor shape again. A little flick there too. Back to A. He does a little trill there, back and forth between second and third fret on the first string. Go to E. It's the only time he actually changes the bass note is when he goes to the E chord. It'd be nice if that E note was in tune. So coming from the A, it's E or E7. Excuse me. And back to this like. Play that twice at the end there. So the full verse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. Alright, now, so we got the basic verse. Now when I tried to move this into a new verse, a new cage system verse, I actually at first was trying to keep as much of the melody from the first verse as possible. So this is what I did. so the way that started out, remember this is what we had in our original version. So almost the same, the slide on that note. This is, by the way, this first chord, this A chord, is based out of the E shape. And I reduce it down to what looks more like an F shaped chord, you know, your first position F chord, move that up so you're between the 5th and the 7th fret. I'm using the open A string as my bass note. Now, right underneath that, I have basically a D minor triad. And if you recall from the previous verse, we're kind of flirting with that D minor tonality. It's really not a D minor, but we're using that F note there in conjunction with the adjacent E note. So that's what we do when we go to the D chord there. It starts with A. This is the beginning of that second verse. D, back to A. Excuse me. So I'm trying to emulate as much as I can from that previous verse. I've shifted everything up, but I can get the same notes and the same pitches from the previous verse. Now that I've established that verse, that sound of the first verse, I'm gonna change things a little bit now. I'm gonna go to the 4 chord, the D. Things are starting to change here a bit, but that is echoing. Oh, I didn't talk about the D chord. That's a D7 with a G shape, a partial. Then I go back to my A chord. This time, this is based out of a D7 shape played between the 7th and the 9th fret, but I'm gonna bring my pinky up to get that same riff from the previous verse, because I like that riff and I don't want to lose that. Our E chord. Alright, so now I've done something with the E chord. I've changed things around a little bit. Basically, that's a D-shaped E7 chord. But I'm going to put the major third in the bass. It's a G sharp. So that mixes things up a little bit. Now that I've worked my way down from now I've worked my way down, so I'm going to go back. So now I've worked myself back to that first A chord that we were using before. Okay, so I better stop there. I'll do the third part as the next video.